Ruff, welcome to the Pacific Town Hall. Today, our agenda is to talk about founding principles and values and constitutions. And there's a lot of discussion going on right now around the Cardano community about the need for some founding documents and what that might look like. And rather than having IOG kind of bestow us with some founding documents, the community is kind of having some conversations on what would it look like if it came from the bottom up. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that. Would you be wanting to kick us off, Joe, maybe with your presentation? Would you be prepared to do that? I know you did something along these lines for the Women of Cardano after Town Hall. And...
Nothing like being straight back into it. Hi, kia ora, everybody. I've been out of Catalyst for a couple of 3 weeks looking after whānau stuff, and as I arrive back, this conversation is starting to light up, which is really, really exciting. Something that I'm really passionate about. There's already a couple of videos on the Swarm channel from a Catalyst women group discussion that we had, and actually it was too long, it got split into 2 videos. watch both of them, but the second one has more constitutional stuff in it. I don't know if I can find really quickly the actual slides.
I just dropped them into chat.
That I did. You just dropped it into chat. Oh, nice. Thank you, Nori, as always, on the spot. Okay, let me share. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
So I haven't reviewed these or really looked at them, to be honest with you, since I presented them. But yeah, we had a conversation in Catalyst Women about a constitution. It's very near and dear to my heart personally. I live in New Zealand. I'll go into why that's important in a moment. In the Catalyst Women group, it was really a discussion around the fact that, you know, women haven't been involved necessarily in some of the more historic constitutions. And it's important that if we are going to build a new constitution for this global community, that women's voices are not just represented, but they're involved in leading this conversation and maybe doing it in a slightly different way. This quote here on the screen now is from the first African recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. Peter, you just mentioned that Africa does things slightly differently. They have done slightly different things slightly differently. And in particular, the South African Constitution was one of the first that was really quite inclusive and took in the views of women in a big way. And it's also a good pattern to look at the South African Constitution, how that actually, you know, came about, what the process was to develop that, and something that's worth looking into. I'm in no way, shape or form an expert, but it's a point of interest that I highly recommend that our community looks into. But I suppose the first question is, what is a constitution? What does it do? What does it need to be? These are some of the things that, you know, I've grabbed from online about constitutions. The first one is the simplest one, obviously, WikiHow. How an organization of people runs its affairs, you know. That says so much in so few words. The last one particularly is of interest because that's from the government of the country that I live in. and it says it's about public power. And that's kind of interesting, and I'll come to why in a minute. Do we need a constitution is one of the questions that I had. And what about if there is no constitution? So that quote at the bottom of, you know, what is a constitution talks about the New Zealand government saying it's about public power. But actually in New Zealand, there is no constitution. There is a constitutional act, but there isn't actually a constitution that has been agreed by the people. And that's because there are two systems here essentially living side by side and constantly negotiating how public power is distributed and how rules are made and how they are enforced and the behaviours of the people. One of those systems is the Indigenous system from the Māori people that live and are the guardians of New Zealand, essentially. Kaitiaki tanga is one of their primary principles, which means looking after all and everything, essentially. So for 200 years, there's not been a constitution. There's been a government in place through the colonisation of New Zealand, and the colonisers essentially drew up a treaty right at the very beginning to work in a co-governance arrangement with the Māori people. And so obviously the colonising force is a top-down institutional monarchy. You know, that's the shape, it's a pyramid. The Māori people have a polycentric governance system, essentially, where the rules and the laws are and how people behave is really at the grassroots at a whānau and hapu level, which is essentially your family and your extended family level. And so those things come into conflict all the time. There was some attempts very early on to get the Māori to change and, you know, establish this kind of pyramid shape, which was somewhat successful so that things could move forward. But it's certainly, when you talk to whānau on the ground, you know, they have definitely rules and behaviours that are governed by the people in the place where they live, and that's more important to them. It's called tikanga. It's traditions and rituals that take place on the ground about how they design and decide things. So yeah, even though the New Zealand government says, you know, constitution is here, it's about public power, there isn't actually a constitution in New Zealand. And I mentioned in the discussion that kind of happened earlier on today as part of the Gimba Labs constitutional conversation. That's kind of interesting in lots of ways, because it does force the conversation to stay active and stay alive, and for things to constantly be discussed and negotiated and debated and changed as well. Changes are happening constantly, which keeps it a living thing that is constantly being discussed, and keeps it alive as well. And it also elevates, I think, the importance of it in everybody getting involved, because people understand that it's not decided, and therefore your voice is important continually, which is one of the challenges that we were discussing earlier in Gimba Labs. Like, how do you get people to actually, you know, get engaged? And sometimes a colonizing force, which in this case could be IOG, saying this is the way things are going to do things, actually helps everybody to get involved, right? Like the dissonance is important, possibly. It's an idea. Things that make up a constitution, values and principles. There is a survey that has been developed by the group in Gimba Labs, which I'm sure Nori's got the link for that too, that you can drop into
I think
chat.
Matthias just dropped it in chat, so it's there.
Cool, awesome. It talks about principles and it asks for ideas. And I questioned this morning why the survey, because I've just got into the conversation that they've been having. And more than anything else, the feeling from that group this morning is it's about holding up a mirror to IOG from the community and saying, look, there are people that are interested, there are people that are engaged, and here are some of the things that we are talking about that we want in our constitution. So it's essentially a early data gathering exercise to start and spark the conversation. It's not a whatever you put in the form, this is what's going to end up in the constitution. Right? It's literally a engagement tool to see what people do think and what their principles might be. Seeing as we have a decentralized community, it makes sense to have a decentralized mirror that we can hold back to IOG and say, look, there's lots here that needs working on, and it shouldn't come from top down. All of these voices need to be represented in the conversation. There are lots of different constitutions. There's been internet-based digital constitutions before. The interesting one for me on this slide is when there was discussion early in the 1980s about the ICANN becoming a form of government, right? Like, so how you actually, establish a constitution for the internet. That was a conversation that started back in 1998, with the constitution around ICANN. So this is not new. There are lots of people working on it. The other thing to consider is, what's an alternative to a constitution? What are the other things, systems that can help people organize themselves better? Back to that question, do we actually need one? Are there other things that we can put in place, which comes back to what do we want it to be and do for our community? There are 201 constitutions already out there, and that's not including company ones. Constitute project obviously is outside of Cardano, which was pointed out to me this morning, right? Not part of our community, but there's a huge wealth of knowledge about how constitutions form and expertise that we could draw on and probably draw into the Cardano community on this very question, which may be useful. Certainly looking at the 201 constitutions that are out there is probably useful for people that are deep into this to do. And the link there is gives you a list of them all, essentially, and you can see them all. So this is the provocation that I made back in March. Should we be starting to ask questions? And Gimbal Labs have started asking questions. Mine were a little bit more esoteric than the ones that Gimbal Labs have asked. Why are we here? What do we share beliefs about? And this would be an approach that I like and prefer, and something that could probably come after, which is kind of tapping into people and families and how you live your life and the behaviors that you would like to see from the people around you, and the systems that the people use would then reflect those behaviors. So these are the questions that I came up with, and certainly points for discussion, I think. That's it. As I say, it's a provocation. There's lots of questions in there and lots of information in there. So there's no, there's no assumption on any part that any of this is right. It was just from research that I've done over the years, the things that I pulled together to start asking the question about a constitution. So I hope that's kind of like a good place to start, and lots of threads to pick up on.
Mhm. Thanks, Joe. That was amazing. There's so much great data in there too, with links to different resources. I think that'll be a really important resource for us to dig into and research all these things as we look at different things. So thanks for presenting and putting that together.
You're welcome. Kia ora.
Maybe now we could open it up to thoughts like, what do you all think about founding documents or constitutions, or even more basic, looking at what should be the founding principles or values or things. And I guess even at a higher level, it might be interesting to talk about how do we do it. Joe mentioned it shouldn't be top down from IOG. They shouldn't hand us a constitution to sign and pledge to. It would be amazing if the community could figure out a process to get all the voices and have the conversations and drive towards some process where we can come up with one. Or maybe the higher level question that Joe mentioned at the very beginning is, do we even need one? Is there a different way of doing it? So just kind of throwing those questions out there to see what sticks and what people are interested in talking about.
Did someone provide a little bit more background? Like it's kind of extending what your line of questioning, Nori. Like, I'm curious, like where this is coming from. Like, it's all fine and good for us to draft a constitution, but is it just like a glorified mission statement that goes on a wiki somewhere, or like is there a separate conversation going on about governance where this constitution will actually have teeth? Like in the constitutions that Joe is talking about, like they're canonical, like legal documents, right? Like it's like everything else, all the rights stem from, responsibilities stem from that. Like, do we have the legal or technological equivalent, you know, for this Cardano constitution? Is like, does it have teeth? Because those are two different conversations then, right? So, and then for me, like, I think, you know, what the reason I'm attracted to Cardano, and I think a lot of us are, is like, is this, yeah, like it definitely has this focus on like community and like social activism. So like, I would want a constitution to reflect that. I think that would be, I think, one of those obvious, like if, as you were talking, Joe, I went to cardano.org and just the very first like splash screen, like just cut and paste that text. And then you go to discover Cardano, and it's like, it's about people, it's about community, blah, blah, blah. And like, and then it starts talking about technology, right? So I like, should a constitution like actually put the community before the technology, which is an interesting question for a blockchain technology, because, you know, the technology, you know, needs research and it needs maintenance, right? Like, so we need to do R&D and develop it and maintain it. And is that de facto the most important thing by itself, like technology for technology's sake, right? And I think if in the Cardano community's case, most of us would say no. So then a constitution should definitely reflect that if it's going to be a Cardano constitution, in my opinion. So, but again, it's like, it sounds so abstract. Like I just popped in the Pacific Town Hall because like I like seeing you guys. So I know nothing more about what's going on with the Cardano constitution right now. So if somebody could provide a little bit more background of like where that's at, or like how their opinion on how that's going.
You're right at the start of the conversation, Peter, and all those questions are good and relevant questions. Should it be about people? Should it be connecting, you know, a piece of technology back to planet Earth and lives on planet Earth? Is that what this document, and does it have teeth? They're good questions to ask. Do we want a constitution to have teeth?
I think some of the context, at least for me, is we're heading into Voltaire, which is kind of the Cardano governance and how we do it. And I think this is kind of a grassroots community initiative to have a voice in that conversation. Up until now, IOG has pretty much presented a bunch of things at each major stage because it has been very blockchain technology focused and they're developing it. But when we start talking about governance and community and stuff, that gets beyond the software that they're building and into the human stuff. And I think we do need a seat at that table to say, this is what's important. This is what we should include and think about. Yeah, Matthias.
Yes, so I think there's a seat for IOG at our table. That's how I see it. But and so why now, right? Why are we having this conversation now? More so in the forefront. And I think as Nori mentioned, we essentially started the Voltaire era already, right? But it's very top down from IOG, and they have shown that they do not know everything either. They've done severe, grave mistakes in highlighting or excluding certain sub-communities within the greater Cardano community, and have caused harm because of that. And from my perspective, it would be very unfortunate if we were just to repeat the same mistakes as many people have done before. And this is also not even something that IOG claims they want to do, right? It's all about, I mean, most of us, I'd argue, are here because of the ethos of Cardano, right? There are various humanistic approaches, and it's to make the world a better place for all, right? Which is great. This is why we're here. But a for-profit company is probably not the right organization to determine all of that. And so far, that's been happening. So I think, as Joe pointed out, kind of have it that mirror, right? Show to IOG, look, we are capable human beings. You don't have to treat us as infants. This is what we want, because you're telling us Voltaire is going to be, like Cardano is going to be in the hands of the community. Well, we're telling you right now, we might not take full ownership on technology conversations, even though we have very capable community members there as well, right? But the community aspect, the governance aspect, that is something that I feel we need to take on. And that's why we're having this discussion right now.
So, Brian?
Yeah, I had a few thoughts. I'm a very kind of details-oriented person, and I'm also a systems thinker. So I think I can answer at least part of some of the questions here about teeth. One of the things I like to do when I'm analyzing a system is, well, where does the authority lie? Not in like authoritarian, I just mean points of control. And there's some interesting ones in Cardano. If you look at a business, a normal business, where the rubber meets the road in control in a business is at the bank. Who can write checks and who can tell checks to stop being written? And so Cardano, makes that pretty easy, that if there was a governance system and a set of procedures and policies that we followed, control of Cardano's bank accounts on the blockchain could be part of that. And that could be a quite compelling force. The other points of control, the big ones that I see, which haven't been talked about yet, is the protocol itself. So that's controlled by software developers deciding to pound keys on a keyboard, and SPOs deciding to run those updated software on their blockchain or not. So those are also points of control where decisions can be enforced.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered the role of SPOs in the governance framework very much, but they are a critical infrastructure. Like, they control the network, and if SPOs go on strike or shut down their nodes and protest, Cardano stops. So when you said where are the choke points, or where are the teeth, there's some there for sure. So that makes me think they need to be part of the conversation, or at least have some function in the governance model.
Yeah, when I said some teeth, it's exactly what, in my ideal scenario, it's exactly what Brian was going with, right? This idea, like, maybe we get to a place where there is like a governance smart contract that implements the Constitution. The Constitution are like actionable rules, like Coda's law, and the Cardano Constitution and it has multi-sig control over the treasury wallets, and so like it's now in the hands of the Constitution-driven smart contracts. Like, that would be the Cardano way, right? Like that's where we want to get to, right? So if that's where we're like, that would be great to me. That's teeth, like that's the ultimate teeth, right? So but again, if this is like an act, like so yeah, I didn't quite get the connection, nor I understand what you're saying now. Like as far as going into Voltaire, I know there's been ongoing discussion within the community, separate from like the community itself, going like what role do we have over governance? And yes, I understand where this is coming from now. So this is like so this is like Joe was saying, kind of early days of like people just trying to conceptualize this whole thing, right? And how to, I guess, at some point start talking to IOG about it, like, and but so okay, so put me down for like, this thing is worthless unless it has teeth. So it's like, otherwise it's just a marketing exercise again, like another, like, and we've done that, the work's done already. The website looks great, sign me up. I love all the stuff that says on the website. If we can just cut and paste that and put into an actual constitution where it's code as law, as smart contracts, great. Like that's the ethos. Most, you know, we can wordsmith it here and there, but like that principle of like using technology to change the world and make it equal and better for all, like that's, most of us are here, the majority of us are social change makers. Like that's a big part of why we want to do Cardano. There's for-profit business, we need to make a living, we want to make money too, that's great. That if that's, you know, or you want to make money to do other things, great. You know, that's part of a cryptocurrency blockchain community as well. So I don't know, I would love to see it go that direction. But I guess who is there like an actual like working group that's kind of tasked with putting something together, like and actually drafting a document?
There's a small group in Gimbal Labs on their server, which is, you know, where the discussion has, you know, really kind of started, and that's it at this point. I mean, there is discussion in community governance oversight, audit, you know, in various different places. There are DAO discussions going on. So there are lots of people floating around the issue and making decisions on various different levels for either their small group or you know, talking about it in a wider sense. But there is no home for it yet as such, apart from this small thread. But it kind of feels like that there should be a home for it now. And if a constitution is to have teeth, to use your words, then it does follow that it will guide the behavior of developers and what gets built on Cardano. I mean, do we want to start with like Google started, like, you know, do no, what was it? Do no evil, or don't be evil, something like that.
Yeah, but I guess one important clarification for me, this is not like an IOG driven thing when there's like, hey, we're working on constitution, give us your feedback and we're going to put all this stuff in place and it's suddenly we're going to switch over, the new Voltaire governance is going to run like this. No, this is a community grassroots driven thing where we're saying, wouldn't it be nice to have a Cardano constitution? And this is how it should, but then, so progressively getting to that end state, ideally it is, you know, if IOG is going to do what it's going to do and like become more hands-off and decentralized, then there's going to be there needs to be a community to take it somewhere. So if that community comes with already a lot of thought out stuff about a constitution, right, or something that's going to be the baseline set of rules to run this community, that's great, right? So that makes sense to start the discussion now.
Yeah. So as was pointed out this morning, there were, or this afternoon for some, this morning for me, there is circles already. There is, you know, various different, if you like, constitutional bodies who are guiding behavior and you know, sensing problems and you know, starting to work out how to fix them. So there is some governance in place already, but that's not governed by a set of values or principles in any way, shape or form to be able to do the if not this then that, or, you know, even over conversations, you know, like, do we value everybody's opinion over speed of implementing a solution? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do we prioritize those things and make a call about those things, you know, like in some cases it makes sense to the group that are making the decision to just let's get something out there. In other cases it's like, no, actually we need to be much broader with this, which means it's going to take longer to implement, you know, like how do you make those trade-offs, I suppose, is where the teeth really bite.
Yeah, and it's like interesting, like constitutions are not specific, right? Like they don't have the if then whens. They're like you said, they're the values of the principles. Like these are our values, these are principles. And if you're writing rules, whether that's like federal laws or like rules or procedures of how your community, online community should run, if you're writing those rules, they should be in sync with these values and principles. And if you write one and you implement it, somebody in your community can challenge that rule and say it's not in sync with the value and principle. And then you have some kind of mediation, you know, we have like, you know, Supreme Court in countries, right? But like, anyway, so the point being is that it's like these high level generic values and principles. So, and they should be able to stand the test of time as you have these like different issues come up, go, oh, does it meet this? You know, it's not, this represents value 3 and this, you know, or this violates value 4. We should not do this, right? So that's what you're talking about, right? Like, but that, yeah, that's a whole abstract layer. That's not easy to do because you want to keep it abstract. Like ideally, if you're putting a constitution in place, right, like it's something that lasts over generations. And if you're talking about a country, and technology, we're talking 3-5 years as a generation, right? So can you design a constitution that could last a technology change, you know, can it outlast that? Like, so your rules should be generic enough. So yeah, anyway, interesting.
Technology might last for 3-5 years, but the community doesn't necessarily. I mean,
well, I think this is back to my earlier point. No, this is the thing. Like, do we expect this like community to outlast like 3-5 year technology changes, or will all of us be off somewhere else chasing the next bright thing, right? Like, is this about building a different world or better community? And we're going to use we're all technologists, so we're going to use technology, and we've all congregated around this tool. Like, is that what we're talking about? Is this what this constitution is protecting? Is it a constitution for a community, or is it a constitution for a technology stack? Because if it's a constitution for a technology stack, that's going to, like I said, 3-5 year technology cycles, right? So like, you know, blockchain's built for a little bit longer term than that. But anyway, so I think, and so my point being is that, so aside, I think that's a separate discussion from the wording of a constitution needs to be generic enough so that's not technology specific, that as things mature, you don't have to keep updating your constitution. It should be hard to, like, you know, in every country, it's like super hard to change the constitution for a good reason, right? So I don't know, that should be maybe another requirement. I don't know, like what percentage of what percentage of ADA wallet holders need to vote in favor of something to actually change the constitution, like 90% or something, like something ridiculous like that. So anyway, these are all fun political science things, I guess, to think about. This goes beyond tokenomics now.
It does. And also, to be clear, this group that was formed at Gimbal Labs isn't seeking to write a constitution. It's too big. It's like all of Cardano and everybody. So the group is seeking to get the conversation going and getting input and trying to reach as broad a group in the community as possible to say, let's talk about this. And maybe thousands of conversations happen in different groups, and then we find a way to bring all those groups together in some kind of a congress or something to talk about it. And it'll probably happen over a number of months or maybe even years. But just to get that ball rolling, we're not seeking to write it. We're seeking to get that massive stone of effort moving a little bit. And maybe other people will pitch in and help it go some more until we get something done. Dylan, you raised your hand.
Yeah. Can I just ask a quick question? Is there a constitution in any other blockchain? So that's something that I'm not sure about.
That's a good question.
Has anyone got any information regarding that? I like all the points. We've been discussing it here internally as well.
There's other blockchains?
Well, I mean, it's just, yeah. How are they doing?
That's a bad joke.
Yeah, I understand if you've, but just looking at that, if we're looking at the option of a constitution, has it been done before? Or is this just something new? And then it goes back to the question of, is it necessary, or is this what Cardano and Catalyst is for those changes that can happen? I see it as a good thing. I guess it then depends on, yes, is it both technology and community based, or how do you run that constitution? How is that governed? As someone pointed out just a second ago, sorry, I didn't catch who it was, that, you know, you generally need 90% votes there to then change that constitution. And then would that constitution even serve purpose in 5-10 years, or would it just be sort of outdated and need reforming and reformatting? So yeah, my main question was really just, so there's some there. If you want to let us know what they are, that'd be great.
They mention EOS and
Yep.
Decred or Decred.
Okay.
And it's an article that discusses those two communities' attempts at creating a constitution, which might be
Yeah.
really relevant to what we're doing.
And constitution now doesn't count. That's
No.
that's a different thing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes Cardano different from, say, Bitcoin is Bitcoin has no treasury. So again, going back to that teeth and where the rubber meets the road, if you have no treasury, you can't spend money on anything. Why would you have a constitution? Like, what could the constitution control? There is nothing. The Bitcoin blockchain is at the base controlled by the miners. Whatever version of the software they choose to run, that's what Bitcoin is.
Yeah, it's funny we don't hear that more often, right? Like that, you know, you're right. At the end of the day, it's whatever the SPO nodes confirm as blocks or blocks. Like that's our blockchain. So, but I'm not too familiar with the SPO side of things. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, whatever changes get introduced to the blockchain, the nodes have to adopt it. Otherwise, it's just code. It's not live. Like it's not on the mainnet. So, does that influence a constitution strategy? Like, is there any point like trying to make, so is that who you're trying to appeal to? Is that your votes? Is that like X number of like minting SPOs that are live today? Like you need a certain percentage of those to, I don't know. Sorry, I just keep chatting, Matthias. Sorry, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, for Bitcoin, I feel that, well, it is true there's no constitution. I feel that the original white paper and as well newsgroup conversations, especially looking at the entries of Satoshi Nakamoto, are often used as, well, this is what Satoshi Nakamoto wanted, right? And now you have almost religious wars over block size increases and whatnot, right? And various personas coming out of the woods and claiming they're Satoshi, right? And all of that stuff, we know about it. Not to, you know, yeah, I'm gonna go there. Maybe we should officially create a cult, like the cult of Ouroboros, and maybe we don't need a constitution, maybe we need a Bible or something like that.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But
Well,
but Bitcoin is a good case, right? Because or even Ethereum, right? To Peter's point, is it code is law or something else law, right? For me, I'm heavily biased in favor of community. Like in the constitution, I don't even care. Like it doesn't. For me, leave the technology out. Maybe there's a good use case to include technology. Probably there is. I'm just not seeing that right now because I'm so focused on the community and how we operate as a community, how we treat each other, etc. That is something that I'm very concerned with or interested in, because to Peter's point, yes, technology develops much faster. Humans usually don't. So now it's about finding principles. How do we want to operate?
And that's the opportunity, right? Like that's I think it's AdaGov, which is another, so it's been around for a while. It's one of the first things that I kind of looked at. They've got a YouTube video, they've started a new YouTube channel, and the kind of opening scenes of that video are about the biggest problem to solve, which we talk about in Project Catalyst, right? Which is the highest potential of human collaboration. We haven't worked out how to collaborate. We worked out how to compete. We do that very well in lots of different ways, right? But we haven't truly worked out how to collaborate. And that's about behavior. That's about behavior, and behavior is based on values. So, is it useful for us to do it? I think, my answer to those questions that I posed earlier is yes, it's really useful. And I suppose one of the reasons that it first came up in Catalyst Women back in March was some behavior that was demonstrated, right? We had, and I am gonna just mention this but then drop it, right? So I don't want to rehash it, but we had the Rick's Picks thing, right? And then there was a huge uproar about the Rick's Picks thing because Rick had picked a certain number of things, and it wasn't necessarily for Catalyst Women, certainly for me and the group that I had the conversation with about the fact that he'd picked those things. It was that there was no right of reply for anybody else to put up theirs in the town hall, which is the main meeting place for the community. Right? That was the issue for me more than his picks, and that's a behavior. Is there a right of reply? Is there a, who makes those decisions about, what should be presented to the community? And I've noticed, certainly this morning, the town halls got really short now, really, really short. And I wonder if that's a reaction to exactly that point, that was made. But there you go. It's about behavior and about finding our rules for how we collaborate, how we govern a commons, how we distribute a treasury that is common to all of us.
Well, religious creed is one option, according to Matthias. Or we go with like legalized constitutional code. I don't know, religious creed might be easier.
Certainly in the US.
It helps, like, Satoshi is anonymous, right? Like, I think Charles kind of ruins it a little bit. So there's a bit of cult of Charles going on, but there's I like the idea of like cult of Ouroboros, like that.
I like it too. I mean, there is I've even looked at it here in New Zealand, actually probably the easiest way for us to formulate some of the stuff that we were doing here. And I made the suggestion was we actually form a church. That would be a better way of doing it.
Good tax, tax situation.
Benefits for sure.
Yeah.
Matthias.
Yeah, I mean, religion kind of makes sense if you look at it at the value, right? I mean, at some level, and of course, from a very broad perspective and superficial, but to me, if you look at religious texts, those are determining, procedures really, and sometimes implicit values, but essentially, religion should be probably about, values. Oversimplifying, I'm not saying what religion should be for you, but I think going back to values and principles. And not saying technology is not important. I put it in the chat. So if you weren't here last time, thank you again, Brian, for the incredible, awesome and useful walkthrough on how to set up a stake pool. I do believe, being an SBO will be one of my roles officially in a couple of weeks or maybe months. It is important, and I think we need both essentially.
That was recorded, right? So I missed that, but yeah, was that
Yeah, it was. So
in the chat earlier? Yeah, awesome. Thanks for doing that, Brian. I'm gonna check that out too.
Nin, you have your hand up.
Hey, I'm in a camp where I'm not quite sure. So I want to start with saying, I think Sean Sieber or someone from YCOM, they defined culture is what people do when no one's watching, right? And on Joe's point, we haven't figured out collaboration. How do we do it effectively between proposers and projects and so on, and between teams? I think ultimately it comes down to like the values and principles that you have as a person, and whether you're open to collaboration or you see everyone else as competitors. And even if we put in into a constitution, we collaborate with each other, right? As in, we strive to uphold those principles, and we strive towards impact and so on. Like I assume the constitution is going to be bomb.com and fully flushed out and truly reflect the values of the whole community. On one side, people will look up to it and take pride and actually strive towards self-improvement and reflecting those values and walking out those values. But on the other side, if you put teeth behind and legalize something like this, then it would be used to punish people or keep people out from the community. And that's my concern, because not everybody wants to contribute, not everybody wants to collaborate. Yeah. But yeah, maybe it is a belief statement, right? Maybe it is a cult and a church. Maybe it is just a ethos statement, like something I tell all of my team members. We work hard. We participate and we communicate, right? And then I get into what those means. At my last company, we had we commit and deliver, and before that, they had don't be evil, right? But it wasn't like if you commit and you don't deliver, then you're fired, right? It looks bad for sure, but yeah. So I think it's it's very important to think about these things, and have our North Star as a community, something to strive for, right? But I'm curious because, we have a very diverse community, and people already, there's a lot of conflict in the community also. So this could be another layer, a reason why people, fight over something or accuse others. So I want to be mindful of that, not to keep people out of the community. And like at some point I Googled the "Don't Be Evil" was was don't be evil, but really, right? Yeah.
Thanks, Nim. Those are some great thoughts.
Or did I make you lose your train of thought? Sorry.
Matthias and then Brian.
I was watching Dylan do something with test tubes. So I was like, what the hell is Dylan doing over there? It's like creating I don't know. So that's like test tube NFTs. So sorry to interrupt again, Matthias.
Sorry,
that's
sorry, I don't mean to distract you.
I thought it was fascinating. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here on my couch.
Since you brought
Doing
up,
like in a
maybe
lab
we
of
could
some
have-
sort.
we could have Dylan give a presentation next time on algae token and the stuff he's doing there.
Oh, algae token, of course. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, definitely look forward to learning more.
Okay.
No problem.
Is conflict bad? Yeah, I won't jump on that because it will be self-advertisement, but maybe procedures or processes should be part of the constitution. How do we deal with the conflict? Do we sue each other? Because, in contracts, what you usually do, you sign an arbitration clause. But anyway, right, don't be evil, right? Empty words. And it's interesting that Peter picked what's written on Cardano.org, because that site is actually operated by the Cardano Foundation, who has over many years not, delivered a lot. So we do want to avoid empty words, I think, right? And really live by those values and principles and can refer to those, and we take those seriously. And for that, we need the diverse body of all of Cardano, right? All of the communities, many, many, many individuals. And that is why it's going to be of highest importance within that Gimbal Labs working group, and for everyone who is interested in that, to share that form, just as a conversation starter, right? To identify what are principles that we need to think about when drafting a document or any form of Bible, Quran, Constitution, Charter, Manifesto, right? Interpretive dance, I have no idea, whatever form it is, right? To come up with some material that meets our needs to hopefully make it apparent how we want to think about the Cardano community and how we deal with that. So yeah, I really second Nin's call for inclusion there.
Brian?
Yeah, I also thought Nin raised some interesting points. Had a comment on a couple. I agree that if people get power and then have the ability to misuse it, that is a problem. So in any system like this, you might have heard the saying, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. So if you want to maintain a peaceful revolution, then there needs to be a way to change the system, that whatever system we put in place. There needs to be a way for us to say, no, this isn't working. We're going to try something else now, even if the people who do have control don't want to give it up. So I don't know what that would look like, but and to carry on that analogy a bit further, you might ask, well, what would violent revolution look like? And I think one way it would look like is people just leave Cardano. They say, I don't like what's going on here. I'm going to go use this other blockchain. Cardano participation is voluntary. So we could also flip this around and say, if we're going to make a constitution, what would attract people and get them excited about participating? That's all I had to say.
Thanks, Brian. Joe?
I feel like that's the best layout segue that I could possibly imagine. Because the point I was going to make is I think this is just a massive opportunity right now, right? The world is in dire straits, right? There is a severe lack of hope, you know, globally right now. And this community and the character of the people that populate this community, it's why I'm here. You know, I'm a designer. I like using the tech, but I'm not a coder. I'm not bashing on the keyboard and creating the tech. I know what I want to use it for. I know things that I want to do with it. But the reason that could be a million different systems, right? The reason that I'm here is the quality of the character of the people that are populating these spaces that I look forward to, you know, spending time with, really, and having a discussion with. And to make that visible by saying, look, here's a global conversation about how humans can, you know, manage themselves to collaborate better with each other rather than ending up in conflict, is a internationally relevant conversation. And because it's coming from the community, right, it totally trumps anything else that's going on that's coming from governments around the world. If, you know, on a purely commercial, you know, putting my marketing publishing hat on, from a commercial level, you want adoption, you sell hope. And that's the opportunity that we have here. Worth doing, I reckon.
I like that, Joe.
Sell the dream.
Yeah, you get my vote, Joe. We have to elect representatives now. So you're our constitutional representative. Yeah, like I like what Brian was saying too, and following up on Ian's point too about like needing the ability to change, or like, you know, how I was saying earlier, like how like with like regular constitutions, like we're all like, oh, it's impossible to change, or like, you know, like, but maybe that's you know, that's by design. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like Brian was saying, like we need to be able to change with the times, otherwise, you know, people just leave the system or whatever else. So maybe the ability to have a constitution that is self-regulating is actually yet another defining feature, right? Like something new, but then it just seems to like loop back to the DAO discussion now, right? Like how different is a constitution from a bunch of DAO rules? Like, and it's basically this, it kind of is the same thing again in some ways, like, because now we're back to like that discussion we had a few weeks back about like, well, DAOs are great and everything, but like if everything's hard coded and then things change and you have conflict and you need mediation and the rules are too hard coded, then that, you know, therefore DAOs are bad. So that was one of those discussions. And so, but you know, if we design it even better and say, okay, you know, there needs to be a process for conflict resolution, and there's ways to do it in a, I don't know, like, can you code conflict resolution to a degree, Matthias, you know better than I do, but like, obviously at some point you have to hand it off to like some human decision, right? Like the making. So anyway, it kind of seems to, yeah, just kind of echoed a lot of that DAO discussion of like, you know, the constitution is hard coded rules, like, and so is that sounds like we want that, like, because you know what it is, it's because we're convinced right now that if we just put our heads together for a few weeks, we can come up with the best hard coded rules to put into a constitution and we're good to go. Now we will save the world, we will give the world hope, and we will build really cool tech, and you know, that's our, you know, that's the trap, right? Like, so if we can build it with this like self-regulating mechanism that like self-healing, like, and updating, or, you know, dynamic, a dynamic DAO, like, or, you know, I don't know, like, would we turn, like, at some point, is the constitution, like, how different is it from a DAO and DAO rules? Like, is it this discussion of a constitution, is it just going to loop back and turn into a discussion of a type of DAO? Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, that's just the way maybe we make sense of this whole discussion of governance in our space. Because that would be the way to do it, right? If we're gonna have a constitution that, you know, if we agree we want to be able to have some mechanism to, like, if we can have some, again, one of those things where it's very strict, you know, 80-90% of some kind of, you know, voter base or something, ADA holders, if that's the case, then we can change these rules, and here's how you do it, and here's a mechanism. If that's all hard coded and in place, that would be an attractive feature, I think, for any type of constitution. Imagine if we, the Canadian population, could like, you know, decide to like strike up our own referendum at some point in time, and like, where, I don't know, where are you going to get 80-90% support across any population? I don't know what kind of rules. I don't know. Is there any issue that you can get that kind of popular support on? I'm not sure.
I think there are things that humans hold in common.
Right, like don't kill each other, like that.
Yeah,
you
like
can get
like
support for that, probably, right? Like,
yeah.
We can start with that.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually one of the comments that I put in the chat, and I would, you know, please join the chat in the Gimbal Labs around this. Is you know, most countries have a law around killing and stealing, right? Which relates back to a value about life and property, right? And how we think that those are, you know, precious and worth preserving, all right? So, you know, let's start with those things that we hold in common. We all love our children, or 90% of us love our children. You know, there's a good one to start with, right? We want to build something that's not going to hurt them, right? I think there's lots of ways that we can start, and yes, it does touch on religiosity and interpretive dance as well. But maybe we're also, you know, and you know, part of my job is to ask questions, but maybe we're also looking at it in a less creative way than we could do. Does it end up as a piece of paper, or is it a, you know, is it something else? Is it a dashboard of sentiment that is constantly, you know, here are values that are chosen by everybody in the community, and you know, this is the way the community is at the moment, and this will last for a period of time, and we'll make our decisions based on this for now, right? And then it changes, and it changes with the communities that get involved. I don't know, you know, like, does it have to be a piece of paper and, you know, a list? You know, can it be something else? Can it be based on preferences and dispute resolutions that take place? Cue Matthias.
You're really pushing my company. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the and, right? So regarding what is the format, I think that's a very interesting discussion. I think that can change as well. Not in its quote unquote final form, or I'm not sure if there's ever a final form. Maybe there is revisions, right? Just like in open source licenses, right? Which makes it a little bit harder to, you know, which one do I pick? It takes a while, but yeah, maybe it starts with a paper, right? But then certain aspects can be conveyed better in other forms. I'm not sure. And then we have still the aspect of, okay, well, you know, we're want to include all of our community members, and also future community members that are not even part of, represented in amongst languages, for example, at all yet, right? So we want to provide access for everyone. So I think maybe there's not a single source of truth. Maybe it's a combination of things that form this constitution or whatnot.
There's a tool which I've mentioned before, I'm not sure whether in this group or another one, which is Dave Snowden's tool. Does anybody know who Dave Snowden is? he talks about about sensing essentially in networks, and has created a number of tools. I think it's called SenseMaker, actually. I'd need to look it up. Probably Nori's on it already. Which asks people to talk about a situation and then position themselves somewhere on a map, essentially. And those kinds of tools, rather than kind of the blunt survey kind of thing, mean that you go deeper into people's character and their feelings and their values than, coming up with the blunt, that's it. So the Carnarvon network, it's Welsh. Yeah, it means that you get a deeper dialogue and a deeper sense of what people actually feel. I think, using tools like that, which, there's a lot of science behind the Carnarvon work, behind Dave Snowden's work. I think those things are kind of useful, and really that's the discussion that I think is the kickoff discussion, is what are the tools and what's the process, rather than what's the constitution. How are we going to do this? What, is it going to be Google surveys? Because this is probably the least sophisticated way that we could do it, and we have a lot of science to hand. Right? And a lot of data already that we can crunch, so as scientific as Dylan's being with his algae while we speak, we could be as scientific with working out what the in common character is of this community, potentially, which would be a case of maybe collecting some tools together and having a discussion about how they might be used, and how we might get into a process with them.
I like that. I know that Stephen Wittenstall used the Cynefin framework in one of his after town breakouts to do a little bit more of a deep dive into the complexities of certain situations and things. I think that's definitely a tool. Another one that I've been bumping up against a lot and doing a bit around is Theory U, and kind of that model to really understand the gaps, and then how do you bridge from the current state to this future desired state, and really sense, like that's the key word, is sense along the way, and really kind of figure out where things are at and where they're headed. And I think I like that direction, is talking about what are the tools we're going to use, and maybe it's a bunch of tools and we collect information from a bunch of different ways, and then we find some way of synthesizing and talking about it as a community and bringing it all together. Because I think that understanding is going to be very important. And my hope is, rather than people fighting over what's important, we'll find some real common values, and everybody will go, oh my God, we all agree on these really important things. And it would be a unifying kind of discovery, rather than a divisive one, trying to come up with things. But yes.
Yeah, that sparked an interesting thought, right? Where do we want to go? And I mean, IOG labeled Cardano as the financial operating system of the world, right? And we see a lot of DeFi and whatnot, and I'm not excited about that at all, because all I see is speculation right now, right? Some people get richer, some people end up worse, right? That's not what we're standing up for. So I think having the discussion also at the same time, where is it actually where we want to end up, that might be very valuable as well, and then be traced back. Am I using the term right? I'm not sure. But we kind of work backwards, end up at values. Maybe it's maybe a combination of processes, tools, thought experiments. But I would want to have this, be a discussion beyond financial incentives, right? Is this going to be about moon boys? And I was like, no, probably not. I actually even want to have like billionaires who don't care about getting richer be part of the conversation. I believe there's probably one billionaire or whatever that is well-intended, altruistic, and want to do good, but also has seen a lot of shit. And I want to really be everyone, be able to contribute and being listened to. And give me a homework, Joe. What do I need to read? What tools do I need to get familiar with? And there's likely already a couple of resources in the chat, but I really want to, get to a point. I want to understand that while I appreciate the conversations and the thought experiments and the dreaming and the hope, right? Hope for me only carries me so long without action, right? And I'm thinking about, okay, what are the actions to take? And sometimes action is just, for me, probably to get more knowledgeable about what do I need to learn to be a part of this hopefully peaceful revolution. So give me work, please.
You can start with all the links in the presentation. Go and have a look at those, and look at the Constitution project. Would be a start, and then.
But not all the constitutions within there, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's more than a couple of hours work. There's also a document that I'll share. I need to check before I share it, around a constitutional process that has begun or restarted again here in New Zealand from Māori who live here, which is, kind of interesting, the way that they've started designing their process. And they haven't designed the whole process. They've just designed the first part of the process, right? Which really has been about going to each community and having these conversations, and if 6 people turn up the first time, 12 people turn up the next time, 24 the next time, 48 the next time, right? And you start to, build some momentum, and, you keep collecting that data, and, that's the start of the process, is just getting people involved in the conversation. So I'll check, but then I'll see whether I can get permission to share it with you guys as well.
That would be amazing.
It'd be good to see. I mean, obviously Matthias, Nori already engaged. Sounds like Peter's kind of engaged, but Nim, Fletcher, Dylan. There's a link in the chat which is an opening conversation. What are the principles that you would think would be part of a constitution? Are you willing to A, input into that yourselves, and B, share it with your communities? Because that's a good test. There's 9 of us here now, so if all 9 of us would again do at least that, and each get 1 more person, right? That's how movements work, right?
Mm-hmm. And this is the first, for me, of many conversations, I'm sure. And I think it'll be great we are recording this, we can share it. Maybe it'll be a seed for other conversations. But yeah, the forum is really about trying to spread that as far and wide as possible, so we get that initial kind of input from people on values and what they find are meaningful principles for them. And the goal isn't to write a constitution, it's to provide some data back and say, this is what a lot of people think. What do you think? And get that conversation rolling. But I do like Matthias's kind of give me the homework comment. I wrote it down because I think educating ourselves on governance and constitutions and principles and those kind of things is going to be really important so that we all come as informed as possible. And I think part of the Constitution should talk about civic duty and what is our responsibility as somebody who is a citizen of Cardano, and what is it for voting and education and knowing about the governance process and those kind of things. So it asks a lot of us to step up as well to make it work, because it's not just what's in it for me, it's what's my responsibility back to the community. So yeah, I look forward to the conversations that are going to unfold over the next little while. All right. We've gone nearly 52 minutes. Do we have any other comments? Fletcher, you came off mute.
Yeah, I was going to share something, although coming in a little bit out of, I tried to listen as I was running a few errands, and also still, I think being, in my opinion, I guess I'm qualifying everything I'm saying already, but being newer to the discussion and conversation and to kind of this thought process in many ways. I don't know how it fits, so I guess I'm just sharing, wondering if others feel like there's a place for this. But what comes to my mind and heart is I'm listening to this conversation, which at its core to me is about a piece that one of the cores is maintaining relationship, maintaining a lot of what I actually see on, like your page, Matthias. And there's a really close friend of mine who, it's kind of amazing that I just feel so privileged to get to know him, but he developed a kind of borrowing from motivational interviewing, actually, those who may be familiar with those techniques that were used in sort of patient-client interactions, but borrowing from that and growing on that into just day-to-day or leadership, and using those skills to make sure that it's always treating people with inherent value, and particularly it excels in areas where there may be disagreement or around difficult conversations and any kind of, whether real or perceived, power differentials, and navigating change in organizations. And he's deployed it into some really large organizations, was adopted, and has seen just incredible feedback. He doesn't do a whole lot with it. I've been wondering if he would do more. And one of the things I wanted to do is I've been trying to coax him into working with me on maybe offering something to the Cardano community and just doing like a workshop in some way to share it, because I think it's just such an amazing skill set to share in general. And I don't know how it fits into this exactly, except that I hear some of the core values that I hear him speak about, that I feel from him, and kind of seems to touch at the core of just being human and figuring out how to be together in a organization, and while maintaining all of the relationships, even if there's disagreement, like being able to see multiple options, and then having a guiding, and that's kind of the piece too within other organizations, obviously, where he's brought this in, is having people still be able to harness their energies and bring it into alignment with an organizational goal or direction, and at the same time feeling like there's lots of freedom for innovation and bringing forth their own creativity and ownership, sense of ownership, and those kind of pieces. And so that's what was coming to mind.
Can you share a link, Fletcher, to his work? Like, is he published somewhere?
Yeah, he's done nothing to build a website at all either, really, over time. It's kind of interesting how they've gotten far and not at the same time. I'll see if I can pull their thing up.
Kind of interesting as well, because some of the strongest communities that I'm aware of, based on an oral tradition, right? Nothing's written down.
Yeah, that's kind of them. They're just like, I task them all the time, like, what about these things? Because I wish I could just have somebody else do that, because I just want to be with people. I just want to do these things, and I'm no help there either. I've offered to help in some way. It's like, well, we need a website built. I'm like, no, not me. Here, I found it. I'll drop it in the chat.
Awesome, thank you, Don.
Thank you. That sounds to me like yes. So for voting should start, I think tomorrow, pending app updates. For the Fund 9 challenge settings, there is a conflict transformation proposal, which I think this would be a great place, right? But for that, got to vote for the challenge. It did not get stellar reviews, and well, it's maybe a VCA discussion for something that I think should have been filtered out that was rated excellent. But anyway, it's in there, so voters can make the right decision to vote the conflict transformation challenge in. So then for Fund 9, you have a dedicated challenge where you can put that in, because yes, we have those miscellaneous challenges and potentially some other challenges that might fit in there as well, but I think this would be a good place.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered doing it in that way. Carpool, we're working on a kind of a learning platform, and it was just kind of focusing on helping people understand blockchain and crypto, who are really apprehensive kind of in the baby boomer generation, and doing live interactive, that very human touch kind of an approach. But I also wanted to offer other things, and I thought maybe it'd be a cool platform to do sort of fundraising, because he also has a nonprofit arm, and just like, hey, you have this thing, what if you just offered this and did it as like a fundraising thing for the other thing? But this, yeah, it's all kind of new to me, so I'll think about that. Thank you for the suggestion. I'll try to prod him as much as I can.
Thanks, Fletcher. Nin, you have your hand up.
Sounds like a cool person with a cool training. If he ever comes to Cardano, you gotta get him to join the Pacific Town Hall for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be just Catalyst is amazing. It doesn't just have to be for nonprofit. You can tell him it can be for anything, right? Just come and join us, join the conversation. I was thinking more deeply about what Joe said about hope cells, right? In a context of what should be in a constitution. And one of the most powerful things that I've heard while joining all these town halls and breakout rooms and all these meetings is a gentleman in Africa. I forgot which his name or country, but he said, Cardano is giving me the ability to be able to put my skills, and he was talking about Teleprism at the time, my skills on the chain, and and be able to build my reputation and be able to join opportunities that I don't have to wait for my village leader or my regional leader to approve my business license or approve my whatever license in order to get a job or tap into the global market. And similar, but he said it like with a ton more passion, much more eloquently than me, because he lived like that's his reality, and just being able to cut the middleman, and in this case, it's corrupt governments, corrupt officials, right? That are blocking people from achieving and changing their lives. And then that pretty much unlocked a whole room of passion and yes, one world, one market, and so on. And I thought of the SDG goals when we were writing our proposals, right? Like solving for poverty, increasing diversity, increasing equal access to education, and many, many others in there. So I'll personally go through those. I'm committing to this publicly. I'm gonna go through those and put it in the principles of governance. right? I think if you have a cause that people can relate to, and whether it gives them hope or a reason why to contribute, why to join the community, why to do something instead of just talk about it. Because in reality, there are a lot of people that just want to talk, right? Sit on a couch and watch TV, right? You guys are safe, by the way. You're here. You know, just to put it out there. But I think that will draw people who want to do something more than just count their ADA and Cardano, right? Or just watch Netflix. And at the same time, provide some handrail as the community grows.
Excellent. All right. We are right at the bottom of the half hour. We are our 90 minutes. We've had a really nice conversation on principles, values, constitutions, and all sorts of stuff. So this was a really entertaining and educational session. Thanks everybody for attending. And I look forward to the next conversations that we're going to have, because this is definitely not the last one. So thanks everybody for coming and contributing. I'm going to stop the recording here.